Let me share with you what actually happens in consciousness during a 72-hour period following a true change in your assumption. The first 24 hours are crucial, as this is when your new assumption begins to take root in your subconscious mind. The second 24 hours strengthen this new pattern, and by the third day, a complete transformation of consciousness has occurred. Many of you wonder why your manifestations seem to take so long, why your reality doesn't immediately reflect your desires. But I tell you this, there is a specific period of gestation for every seed planted in consciousness, just as there is for every seed planted in the earth. 72 hours represents a complete cycle of transformation in consciousness. Consider this: in Scripture, we read of the 3 days Christ spent in the tomb before his resurrection. This is not merely a historical account, but a profound psychological truth. Every transformation in consciousness requires the 3 days. It's 72 hours before externalization begins. When you truly grasp this principle, something remarkable happens to your entire approach to manifestation. You stop wondering when your desire will manifest and start understanding the precise law that governs all manifestation. You recognize that time is not an enemy, but a necessary component of psychological gestation. Let me tell you something vital about these 72 hours. They begin the moment you completely accept your desire as an accomplished fact, not when you start wishing for it, not when you start affirming it, but when you actually accept it as done in your consciousness. Here's a profound truth about this 72-hour period. It operates whether you believe in it or not. Just as a seed will take a specific time to germinate regardless of whether you understand the process, your assumption will take approximately 72 hours to begin its manifestation regardless of your conscious beliefs about timing. Think about this. Every major change in your life was preceded by a change in your consciousness approximately 72 hours before its physical manifestation. You may not have been aware of it, but this law was operating nonetheless. This law operates in conscious with absolute precision, transforming your entire world through a specific sequence that unfolds over these 72 hours. Let me break down for you exactly what happens during this crucial period of transformation. In the first 24 hours, something profound begins to occur in your consciousness. The moment you truly accept your desire as an accomplished fact, your entire inner world begins to reorganize itself around this new assumption. Old patterns of thought begin to dissolve, and a new pattern starts to form. Many of you have experienced fleeting moments of acceptance only to fall back into doubt and disbelief. But I tell you this, if you can maintain your new assumption for just 72 hours, holding it as true regardless of external evidence, you will set in motion forces that manage to manifest in its manifestation. Consider this: when a woman conceives, she doesn't immediately see external evidence of her pregnancy, yet from the very first moment of conception, forces are at work within her body, preparing for the manifestation of new life. The same is true of your consciousness during these first 24 hours. During the second 24-hour period, something even more remarkable occurs. Your new assumption begins to affect your subjective world, your thoughts, your feelings, your natural reactions to events. You begin to think from your desire fulfilled rather than of it. Let me tell you something crucial about this second day. This is often when doubt tries to creep in. The external world may still show no evidence of change, and your rational mind may try to convince you that nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, massive reorganization is taking place. Here's a profound truth about the second day. It's the period of death to the old man. Just as Christ spent the second day in the tomb, this is when your old patterns of thought and belief must die to make way for the new. This can feel uncomfortable, even disconcerting, but it's absolutely necessary. Think about this. Every transformation in nature goes through a period where the old form must die before the new can emerge. The caterpillar must cease to be a caterpillar before it can become a butterfly. The same principle applies to your consciousness during these crucial 7-2 hours. The very discomfort you might feel during this period is evidence that transformation is occurring. Your old patterns of thought and belief are dissolving, making way for your new assumption to take root and grow. The final 24 hours of this 72-hour period are perhaps the most crucial, for this is when the complete transformation of consciousness occurs. This is the period of resurrection when your new assumption becomes so natural that you can no longer remember how it felt to be in your former state. Let me share with you exactly what happens during these final 24 hours. Your new assumption, which has been gestating in the depths of your consciousness, begins to rise to the surface. It no longer feels like something you're trying to believe, it simply feels like what is. Many of you might experience what seems like a moment of crisis during this final period, but I tell you this, what appears to be a crisis is often the breaking point where the old must give way to the new. It's the darkness before the dawn, the final resistance of the old man before the new man rises. Consider this, in Scripture, it was during the final hours in the tome that the resurrection occurred, not gradually, not partially, but in one complete transformation. The same is true of your consciousness during these final 24 hours. The transformation, when it comes, is complete. When you truly understand this principle, something remarkable happens to your experience of these 72 hours. You stop seeing them as a period of waiting and start recognizing them as a sacred time of transformation. Each hour becomes precious, each moment significant. Let me tell you something vital about these final hours. They often bring what appears to be a complete contradiction to your desire. This is what I call the moment of greatest appearance of failure. But remember, appearances are merely the shadow of past assumptions, not the reality of your present consciousness. Here's a profound truth about this final period. It's when your outer world begins to respond to your new inner conviction. Things begin to shift, often in ways you couldn't have consciously planned or anticipated. People begin to treat you differently. Circumstances begin to rearrange themselves. Hike about this, every great transformation in history appeared darkest just before its completion. The crucifixion preceded the resurrection. The darkest hour comes just before dawn. This principle is reflected in your own consciousness during these final hours. The very circumstances that seem to deny your assumption are often the ones being rearranged to accommodate its fulfillment. What appears to be resistance is actually reorganization. This reorganization of your outer world follows an immutable pattern, much like the transformation of your inner consciousness. Just as a seed must break through the soil that appears to resist it, your new assumption must break through the appearances of your current reality. Let me share with you what actually happens in your outer world during this period. People who seemed indifferent to you suddenly become helpful. Circumstances that appeared fixed begin to shift. Opportunities that weren't visible before suddenly present themselves. All of this occurs not by chance, by law. Many of you observe your outer world anxiously during these 72 hours, looking for signs of change. But I tell you this, the changes are occurring whether you can see them or not. Just as a plant grows beneath the soil before breaking through to the surface, your manifestation is taking form before becoming visible. Consider this: when you plant a seed, the soil must be disturbed. Old patterns must be broken up to make way for new growth. The same is true of your outer world during these 72 hours. What appears as disruption is actually the rearrangement necessary for your new assumption to manifest. When you truly grasp this principle, something remarkable happens to your response to external circumstances during this period. You stop being disturbed by appearances that seem to contradict your assumption. You recognize them as necessary adjustments in the grand pattern of manifestation. Let me tell you something crucial about this reorganization. It often occurs in ways that your conscious mind could never have planned. The wisdom of your subconscious mind, which is one with infinite intelligence, knows exactly how to bring about the conditions necessary for your assumption to materialize. Here's a profound truth about this outer reorganization. It follows the path of least resistance. While your conscious mind might implicate complicated scenarios requiring massive changes, your subconscious mind finds the simplest, most natural way to bring about your desires' fulfillment. Think about this. Every desire you hold contains within itself the seeds of its own fulfillment. When you plant that desire in consciousness through your assumption, it begins to attract and arrange everything necessary for its manifestation. This arrangement often occurs in ways that appear miraculous to the conscious mind. The very circumstances that seem to stand in the way of your desire often become the means of its fulfillment. This is the wisdom of the law operating through the perfect pattern of the 72-hour principle. This pattern unfolds in your experience with a precision that would astonish you if you could see it from a higher perspective. Every thought, every encounter, every seemingly random event during these 72 hours is part of an intricate dance orchestrated by your new assumption. Let me share with you what's actually occurring moment by moment during this period. Your consciousness, having accepted the new assumption, begins to attract corresponding experiences. People begin to treat you according to your new concept of self. Circumstances begin to mirror your inner conviction. This isn't coincidence, it's law. Many of you wonder why certain people suddenly change their behavior towards you, why new opportunities suddenly appear, why solutions to old problems suddenly become clear. But I tell you this, nothing is sudden about it. Each change is the result of your shifted consciousness working through the perfect pattern of these 72 hours. After this, when you drop a pebble into a pond, the ripples move outward in perfect circles affecting every part of the water's surface. Your assumption works in the same way during these 72 hours, sending ripples through the entire fabric of your reality, touching every aspect of your world. When you truly understand this principle, something remarkable happens to your awareness during this period. You begin to recognize every event, every conversation, every seemingly random occurrence as part of the pattern of fathomment. Nothing is meaningless. Everything is significant. Let me tell you something vital about this unfolding pattern. It requires no effort on your part maintaining your assumption. You don't need to make things happen. You don't need to manipulate circumstances. The pattern unfolds by law, not by effort. Here's a profound truth about these 72 hours. They represent a complete cycle of transformation from death of the old to birth of the new. Just as the moon moves through its phases, just as the earth rotates through day and night, your consciousness moves through this perfect pattern of transformation. Think about this. Every great master who ever walked the earth taught the same truth in different words. 3 days in the tome, the third day resurrection, the threefold pattern of transformation. They were all pointing to this same law that operates in consciousness through the center cycle. The very experiences you encounter during this period, whether they appear positive or negative, are all part of the perfect pattern of fulfillment. Nothing is out of place. Nothing is accidental. To recognize and work with this pattern requires a complete reversal of your usual way of thinking. Instead of looking to external events for evidence, you must maintain an unshakable awareness of your assumptions, reality these 72 hours. Let me share with you exactly how to maintain this awareness as the pattern unfolds. When you wake each morning during this period, your first thought must be from the consciousness of your wish fulfilled. Before your feet touch the floor, before your mind engages with the day's activities, you must renew your awareness of already being who you desire to be. Many of you start your days by immediately checking external reality for signs of change. But I tell you this, the external will not show evidence until the full 72 hour cycle is complete. Your task during this time is to live from your new assumption regardless of appearances. Consider this: when an actor takes on a role, they must maintain that character's consciousness throughout the entire performance. They can't drop in and out of character and expect to give a convincing performance. The same is true of your new assumption during these 72 hours. When you truly grasp this principle, something remarkable happens to your daily experience. You stop living in anticipation of change and stop living from the consciousness of the change already accomplished. This is the secret of working with the pattern rather than against it. Let me tell you something crucial about maintaining this awareness. It's not about forcing yourself to believe something. It's about allowing yourself to feel the naturalness of your new state. The more natural it feels, the more powerfully the pattern works. Here's a profound truth about these 72 hours. Your every reaction, your every response, your every inner conversation must spring from your new assumption. This isn't about pretending or affirming. It's about actually occupying your desired state in consciousness. Think about this. Every time you react from your old state of consciousness, you interrupt the pattern. Every time you respond from your new assumption, you strengthen it. The pattern requires consistency in consciousness to work its perfect law. The very circumstances that tempt you to react from your old state are actually opportunities to strengthen your new assumption. Each challenge is a chance to prove the reality of your inner transformation. These challenging moments during the 72 hours are not obstacles to your manifestation. They are vital parts of the pattern itself. They are opportunities to prove the reality of your new state in consciousness. Let me share with you exactly what to do when these moments arise. When circumstances seem to contradict your assumption, when people act contrary to your desired experience, when everything appears to be moving in the opposite direction, these are the moments when your new consciousness must be maintained with even greater conviction. Many of you interpret challenging circumstances as evidence that your assumption isn't working. But I tell you this, these very circumstances are part of the bridge of incidents, necessary events that must occur to bring about the fulfillment of your desire. They are not obstacles, but stepping stones. Consider this. When you're driving at night, the headlights illuminate only a small portion of the road ahead, yet you trust that as you continue moving forward, more of the path will be revealed. The same trust is required during these 72 hours. You don't need to see the entire path. You need only maintain your assumption. When you truly understand this principle, something remarkable happens to your response to challenging circumstances. Instead of being discouraged by apparent contradictions, you begin to welcome them as confirmation that the old patterns are dissolving to make way for the new. Let me tell you something vital about these challenging moments. They often intensify just before the manifestation of your desire. This intensification is not a sign of failure, but a sign that the old patterns are making their final stand before dissolving completely. Here's a profound truth about handling these moments. Your only task is to remain faithful to your assumption. You don't need to fight circumstances, argue with appearances, or try to force changes. Your task is simply to maintain your consciousness of the wish fulfilled. Think about this. Every great manifestation in history was preceded by a period of apparent contradiction. The darkest hour comes just before dawn. The seed must completely break down before the new plant can emerge. These are not merely poetic metaphors. They are descriptions of the law in operation. The very circumstances that seem most opposed to your desire are often being rearranged to bring about its fulfillment. What appears as resistance is actually reorganization. This process of reorganization during the 72 hours follows a precise pattern that, understood, will transform your entire approach to manifestation. What appears as chaos in your outer world is actually perfect order taking shape according to your new assumption. Let me share with you what's actually happening during this reorganization. Your entire world, every person, every circumstance, every condition must adjust itself to match your new assumption. This adjustment often appears as disruption before the new pattern emerges. Many of you become discouraged when your world appears to be falling apart during these 72 hours. But I tell you this, what appears to be falling apart is actually falling into place. The old patterns must dissolve before the new patterns can emerge, just as old structures must be demolished before new ones can be built. Consider this when you rearrange furniture in a room. There's always a moment when everything appears to be in chaos. The room looks worse before it looks better. The same principle applies to the reorganization of your world during these 72 hours. When you truly grasp this principle, something remarkable happens to your perception of change. You stop resisting the apparent chaos and start recognizing it as a necessary part of the reorganization. You understand that disorder is often the prelude to a new and higher order. Let me tell you something crucial about this reorganization. It affects not only your external circumstances, but also your inner world. Old thought patterns dissolve, old emotional responses fade away, old habits naturally fall aside as your new assumption takes root. Here's a profound truth about this process. It works with mathematical precision. Just as water must reach 212 degrees Fahrenheit to boil, just as a seed must remain in darkness before it sprouts, your consciousness must maintain your assumption for approximately 72 hours for complete reorganization to occur. Think about this. Every major shift in your life followed the same pattern. Whether you were conscious of it or not, a change in consciousness always preceded a change in circumstance by approximately 72 hours. This is not coincidence. It is law. The very disruption you experience during this period is evidence that the law is working. Your world is reorganizing itself to match your new assumption with perfect precision. This precision of the law operating through the 72-hour principle is as exact as any law in physics or mathematics. It operates with the same certainty that brings dawn after night, spring after winter, harvest after planting. Let me share with you exactly how this precision manifests in your experience. During these 72 hours, every word you speak, every action you take is either aligned with your new assumption or contradicts it. There is no neutral ground. The law registers everything with perfect precision. Many of you wonder why some manifestations seem to come easily while others appear to resist your efforts. But I tell you this, the law is never working more or less effectively. The only variable is your consciousness, your ability to maintain your assumption consistently throughout the 72-hour period. Consider this. When you drop an object, gravity doesn't sometimes work and sometimes fail. It operates with perfect precision every time. The same is true of this law of consciousness. Your assumption, held steadily for 72 hours, must manifest with the same certainty that a released object must fall. When you truly understand this principle, something remarkable happens to your approach to manifestation. You stop hoping and start knowing. You stop pleading and start accepting. You stop wondering if it will work and start living from the certainty that it must work. Let me tell you something vital about this precision. It operates independently of your past experiences, your current circumstances, or others' opinions. The law responds only to your consciousness, your assumption maintained over these 72 hours. Here's a profound truth about this precise operation of law. It works the same way for everyone, every time. Just as mathematics doesn't play favorites, just as gravity doesn't discriminate, this law operates with perfect precision for anyone who applies it correctly. Think about this. Every successful manifestation you've ever experienced, whether consciously or unconsciously, followed this precise pattern. The law didn't bend or make exceptions. It's simply outpictured with mathematical precision whatever you assume to be true. The very precision that seems to work against you when you doubt is the same precision that works for you when you maintain your assumption. The law is always working with perfect accuracy. Working with this precision requires a complete understanding of how consciousness operates during these 72 hours. Your every thought, your every inner conversation, your every feeling must align with your assumption with the same precision that a mathematician applies to equations. Let me share with you exactly how to maintain this precise alignment. When you wake in the morning, your first thought must be from your new state. When you go about your day, your inner conversations must reflect your assumption. When you fall asleep at night, you must sleep as though your desire is already fulfilled. Many of you approach manifestation with a mixture of old and new states, shifting between doubt and belief, between old patterns and new assumptions. But I tell you this, the law requires precision. You cannot serve two masters. You must choose your assumption and maintain it with unwavering fidelity. Consider this when a watchmaker assembles a timepiece. Every gear, every spring, every component must be precisely aligned. A single misaligned piece affects the entire mechanism. The same is true of your consciousness during these 72 hours. Every aspect must be in perfect alignment. When you truly grasp this principle, something remarkable happens to your mental discipline. You become acutely aware of your thoughts, your inner conversations, your reactions. You recognize that each mental movement either supports or undermines your assumption. Let me tell you something crucial about this precision. It extends to your emotional state as well. You must feel with the same precision that you think. The feeling of your wish fulfilled must be so precise that it becomes your dominant emotional state. Here's a profound truth about working with this precision. It requires constant vigilance during these 72 hours. You cannot afford mental laziness or emotional indulgence in the old state. Every moment must be lived from your new assumption with mathematical precision. Think about this. Just as a scientist in a laboratory must maintain precise conditions for an experiment to succeed, you must maintain precise conditions in consciousness for your assumption to manifest. There can be no contamination from doubts, no dilution with fears. The very precision that makes this law seem demanding is what makes it infallible. When you maintain your assumption with mathematical accuracy, the law must respond with equal precision. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.